In tonight's debate, we're asking whether or not Syria is feeling the pressure from the international community. For the first time, the Arab League has condemned the brutal crackdown of Bashar al-Assad's regime. At the same time, Turkey, which has been trying to negotiate for weeks with Damascus, now says it has lost confidence in Bashar al-Assad. In other words, even Iran, actually, is now telling Syria to look for a non-violent way out of the conflict. But even as the pressure mounts, the repression continues. 6 more people were killed on Monday. So the question we're asking our guests tonight is, does it matter to Syria that they're losing support from several key players? Can that really change anything to the behavior of the regime, or are these just words with absolutely no effect on the ground? So with me tonight to answer these questions are Syrian activist Siobhan. Thank you for being on set with us. You've asked us not to make your family name public, so we're going to respect that. Siobhan, thank you for being here. We have Fouad Al-Obaid. You're a columnist for the Kuwait Times. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And from Norman, Oklahoma, Joshua Landis, who's director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Oklahoma. And Josh, you also write for SyriaComment.com.
Yes, I do. It's a pleasure being with you.
Okay. Gentlemen, I want to put to you that very first question. When you see that Bashar al-Assad is losing the support of Turkey, of the Arab League, when you see that even Iran, which is considered a staunch ally, is beginning to distance itself from Syria, what do you think? Do you think, well, these are just words, it won't change anything? Or do you think, actually the ground is shifting for Bashar al-Assad?
I think at this point, I mean, as you clearly said, a lot of countries are distancing themselves from the Syrian regime, and so far the effect has not, really changed anything in Syria. And I think there has been a tone of confrontation whereby, as long as no real efforts are being applied to do anything really about it, other than diplomatic words here and there, obviously the pressure is mounting on Syria. But there's so far no concrete action, or at least no desire for concrete action has been taken either by the world powers, either Europe or the US, in terms of physically going there and doing something. The Arab League's statement has been weak at the best. The reaction of countries that are neighboring to Syria, although might be a concern for Syria, I think right now they're still not realizing, or at least willing to acknowledge the fact that there is a momentum that's ongoing, and that change for the time being seems to be, at least in the minds of the people ruling in Syria, to be a distant future.
Josh, I want to ask you a question. Do you feel that there is significant change happening here, or would you agree with Fouad here on set?
Change.
You think there's real change?
I think it's important. I understand the last speaker's concerns that it doesn't change the military balance on the ground, but it's preparing in the direction of changing the military balance. This is very isolating. People I've been talking to in the business community of Syria are fed up. People who were very supportive of the regime only months ago are now saying that sanctions are good. They want an end to this regime. They want to get on with their lives. They can see that the Assad regime is leading Syria downwards, and they don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. And by isolating Syria, Western diplomacy is cutting off the options for this regime. Now, nobody has agreed upon a military option yet, but that is likely to come if the regime does not fall because of public pressure.
Josh, I have to say I'm quite surprised, actually, that you think a military action is actually not only on the cards, but likely. For the moment, we seem to be very, very far from boots on the ground. Let's get I see
I wouldn't say
Siobhan.
It's likely. I don't say it's likely, but because the West, in a sense, this has been very capable diplomacy on the part of the United States. To first get Europe lined up, then get the Arab regimes, leave time for Turkey to do it. Now Russia is going to Damascus and back, and they will eventually find themselves in a corner. And it's like herding cats. But increasingly, today, the world cannot think of a military option in Syria, but we've seen one important leader of the Syrian opposition, Mohammed Rahal, come out saying we're going to get a military option in Syria. And increasingly, the world community, which has agreed upon the fact they want an end and they want to see an end to the Assad regime, if an end doesn't come, because of economic strangulation and increasing isolation. They will be forced to look for a military solution.
Siobhan, do you agree with this? Do you see a military solution, perhaps not right now, but some way down the line? You were shaking your head earlier in disbelief.
Well, I don't think there will be any military solution in Syria for different reasons. The first reason that the international community they want to have the Syrian people for them, and so far the actions, they did not have a very glorious time or glorious stories, because we have seen what happened in Afghanistan, we have seen what happened in Iraq, we have seen what happened in Libya even. A lot of civilians died because of this international attacks, and Syria, it's not Libya to start a military action in Syria.
So you're saying, and this is a key factor, that Syrians do not want foreign intervention, contrary to what the Libyans ended up asking for. The Syrians do not want NATO, do not want boots on the ground.
Absolutely not. No NATO, no Arabic intervention in Syria, or no Islamics. I heard some people, they were saying that we prefer to have some Arabic army to help the revolution, or Islamic army to help the revolution. But people, they really don't want that, because the revolution, it will continue by itself. But if the international community can do something, they can help by to put some pressure on Bashar and his regime, and it will be a good help in that case.
Let me bring in Jonathan Paris, who is on the line with us from London to take part in this debate. Jonathan Paris is the Middle East analyst and senior fellow for the Atlantic Council of the United States. Jonathan, thanks for being with us. The question is this: is there currently is Bashar feeling the pressure? Is Bashar al-Assad feeling the pressure from the economic sanctions, from the diplomatic isolation? Does any of this matter to him? Is it making him change his ways?
Well, I think, of course, the answer is yes. But I think what you're really asking is the last part of your question. Does this really matter in the end? Will he somehow survive through the use of force? And I'm not sure. I have said consistently on this program for the last month that it's a matter of when, not if. I think the fact that you see all the other countries starting to look ahead, look at a post-Assad regime, even Iran and Hezbollah are showing indications that they're looking ahead, suggests that it really is a question of when, not if. But I can't tell you, because I'm not on the scene, when the army will fracture and when all the other things will happen that will actually lead to the Assad regime stepping down.
As far as you're concerned, what is the key domino here? What is really the one thing that is going to signal the beginning of the end for Bashar al-Assad? Because a lot of commentators have said the protests are not going to stop. Bashar al-Assad is finished. That's something a lot of people actually believe. However, we've seen with the previous Arab rulers since the beginning of the Arab Spring that they've only left when they have been forced to leave, when they have been either forced out or when they have lost the support of the army. So what do you think could actually change the ground rules for al-Assad?
Well, again, your question has the answer. The army, cohesion of the army is critical to his survival. Already you've seen some defections, even in Damascus, a suburb of Damascus. Some troops defected and got in a fight with the troops, the loyalists. I think what the critical domino is a perfect storm of a variety of things. Schism in the army on the senior leadership ranks. The businessmen in Damascus and Aleppo jump ship. And then you have this perfect storm, which comprises not military or NATO intervention, but clearly unified pressure from, I think, like a contact group of some Arab countries, Turkey, United States, France, and maybe one or two others. They will put a consistent pressure plus economic sanctions. All of those things come together, and the regime concludes it's time to go.
Fuad, how would you currently assess the level of support inside and outside that Bashar al-Assad still has? We've been talking, both Joshua Landis and Jonathan Paris have mentioned the importance of the support of the business community. And there's also, of course, still allies outside, such as Russia and China, which for the moment don't want UN sanctions, for instance, against Syria. So do you think that he still has a lot of support? Let's start with inside domestically.
Well, I think one thing needs to be said is that the momentum for change has begun, and that a lot of people in the region are clearly against him. I'm not sure whether the people in Damascus support or against him. My guess, from what I've heard and read, is that there is a clear stance against the ongoing situation, especially the repression. What happens, I mean, what kind of political arrangement can be made, I think that until now, I mean, can be open for debate. But my understanding is that a lot of countries, at least the neighboring countries, and especially the last few days, the Arab League stance on the issue kind of adds weight on and pressure on the Syrian regime. And I think one of the things that we have seen, especially with the ongoing fight in Tripoli, is that things can suddenly appear in this Arab Spring. I mean, things, we can sit here and predict on how and when or why things will change, but one thing is clear is that a change will happen, I think.
But well, that was the question that we were putting to Jonathan Paris just now. I was observing that for change to happen, there has always, if you look at Tunisia, if you look at Egypt, if you look at Libya, there has always been force switching sides. The army switching side or a rebellion strong enough to topple the ruler. We don't see that happening in Syria right now.
Well, my understanding is that the army is run by relatives of Bashar and that a lot of them are still loyal to him. And at this point, you know, I think with the crumbling of the support of the regime in Syria, there is going to be pressure rising on different elements within the army that are going to have to choose whether to back the Syrian regime or to take the opportunity and maybe risk their lives at doing so to switch sides and to kind of support the rebellion. And I think, as you clearly said, this is the tipping point in most of these Arab revolts for the past several months. When it's going to happen, I'm not sure, but I think with the pressure that's been exerted, it could be soon.
Joshua Landis, what information, can you paint a picture for us? What information do you have of the level of support Mr. Assad enjoys within the ranks of the security forces? For the moment, everyone's been saying they're still very cohesive. Is that changing at all?
I don't think it is changing. I'm sure that there are plenty of people in the ranks and file who are trying to figure out a way out. But, you know, underneath this rebellion, there is a sectarian aspect, and it's the Sunnis against the Alawites. The Christians and other minorities who had been loyal to this regime and are still sitting on the fence are growing quiet. They don't like the killing. They don't want to be supporting this regime anymore, but they don't see what the alternative is right now. But that leaves the Alawites really in the hot seat here. And now, the military, which is the rank and file, is largely Sunni, has not split. So we're far away from that happening. There's been plenty of people in defections, you know, at a minor level. But as long as the military stays together, and we've got to remember that Alawites are 12% of the population. That's about 2.5 million. And the special forces are crammed with Alawites. The upper ranks are crammed with Alawites. They can fight on for a long time, and they're good fighters. They've got the strong military stuff, the tanks and helicopters and so forth. Now, so I don't see anything happening soon, and I certainly don't see this regime giving up the ghost or throwing in the towel or saying, I'm going to go away. I think they're going to fight. They're going to fight to the end. Most of the people at the top of this regime will be killed as soon as they give up. So they have nothing to lose but to fight to the bitter end. That means I think this is a long, difficult path ahead. Now, there are many people who see this as, who believe that there's going to be sort of an automatic fall off, that at some point there's a cascading effect where bankruptcies lead to defections and Damascus will be overwhelmed with popular demonstrations and the regime will just will have to give up. I don't think that's going to happen. It could happen. We don't know. And that's why the question is so far open. If it doesn't happen, there's going to have to be a military response. And increasingly, Syrians inside Syria are calling for a military response. That will leave it up to the West to begin to arm them and other Arabs to fund it. and to sneak weapons in and to try to create a Libya-type situation, which will be long, it'll be involved, and it'll be bloody.
But so essentially what you're saying is the army is showing no sign of serious divisions at the top where it actually matters, which is within the special forces and within the intelligence community. In other words, there's actually nothing, as far as you can see for the moment, that could force the army to turn on Assad or to
no.
just...
And we've seen that the Syrian army has successfully pacified Hama, Homs, Latakia, Deraa, Abu Kamal on the Iraqi border. Now, all these places are boiling with resentment, desire for revenge. Young people are getting arms. But the Syrian army has come down hard on them, and people are getting arrested. They're being tortured. Some are disappearing. There's a monstrous intimidation factor, and the Syrian army is still powerful. Today, there is nothing to challenge it.
And I want to pick up on something you were saying, and I want to put this question to Siobhan. You were saying, Josh, that there are demands within members of the opposition who want a foreign intervention. We have a member of the Syrian opposition here who's an activist here in Paris, Siobhan Onset. He tells us he doesn't want foreign intervention at all.
Just to clear a little point, I don't represent anybody from the opposition. I represent only myself, and I am somebody who is against the system of Bashar al-Assad. So some of the Syrian opposition they asked for a military action in Syria to help the rebellion and to help the revolution, because they have seen that there is no issue for that, but they are really a minority of people who are asking for that. They are a minority, and I don't agree with Joasha about the fact that it's question of Alawite, Sunnite, and other minority, because the minority, Bashar al-Assad just convinced the minority that if he disappears, they will disappear. Bashar al-Assad is protecting the minority, and the minority understand very well that it's not true. That Bashar al-Assad is using the minority to protect himself. He's protecting himself behind the Alawite and other minorities, Sunnite, and it's not only the Alawite who are just sticking in the army and they are leading the army. There are some Sunni generals. There are some Christians. There are some Kurds also, and who are leading and they are for Bashar al-Assad. So I don't think it's a question of Sunnite, Alawite, and minorities.
And you see no signs of the army breaking up for the moment. All right, thank you very much, Siobhan. We're going to have to break for the moment, but we'll be back in just a few moments for the second part of the debate right after this.